Story 1. Puddle of mud. Repeatedly. I saw them at a festival and they were awful. I thought to myself, maybe they are just not suited to large outdoor festival type gigs, as is the case for some bands. I saw them a while later supporting Korn and they were awful. I thought to myself, maybe they are just not suited to 20,000 capacity arena type gigs, as is the case for some bands. I saw them headline a small local show of around 600 capacity and they were awful. I thought to myself, maybe they just really suck. Story 2. My Chemical Romance in 2022. Nothing wrong with the band's performance, but it was at a festival that had clearly oversold. The crowd was rowdy and overexcited, resulting in huge swells and people trying to push towards the stage. I was really concerned I was going to see a crowd crush, and so was the band. They regularly took breaks between songs and tried to get the crowd to calm down, with Gerard repeatedly asking people to take 3 steps back and pleading with the audience to be considerate of other attendees. Their stage manager even came out at one point and asked the same, with little success. They ended their set with a much slower song than usual, Cancer, in an attempt to calm the crowd as they left. You could see on Gerard's face that he was upset about how the night went. He referenced it on stage at their next show when thanking security for how hard they worked to keep the audience safe. Story 3. Went to hear Nina Simone at a small club in Philadelphia in the late 1980s. A friend worked there and tipped us off that it might not go well. This was supposedly her second night, but she had never shown up at all for the first night, nor did she for the first show on our night. Nonetheless, we went hoping for the best. Even with stragglers left over from earlier, it was not a full house. About a half hour after showtime, we heard she was in the house. 15 minutes or so after that, she stomped onto the stage, slammed her purse down on the piano, sat down, and began noodling aimlessly. After 10 minutes or so, it turned into the opening bars of Young, Gifted, and Black. She began the first verse, got a phrase or two in, and stopped. After what felt like an endless silence, she stared out at the room, snarled, "You don't deserve me," and, grabbing her bag, strode down off the stage, through the club, and out into the night, never to be seen again. I suppose we got a Nina Simone experience out of it, even if it was not the one we wanted. Story 4. James Brown in Sydney, 1996. He was very drunk and could barely stand up. He looked like he had no idea where he was or what was happening. He tried doing some funky dance moves but looked like an overweight wrestler trying to pick a coin up off the floor. He would occasionally wail as if in pain. It was unpleasant and disappointing. We left after about 20 minutes. People were leaving through the exits. Story 5. My friend gave me a ticket to the Guns N' Roses show that ended up not happening and turning into a riot. I chipped a tooth. I did not chip my tooth during the riot. It was actually on an overcooked peanut that I ate while waiting. I usually leave that part out when telling the story. Story 6. Old Dirty Bastard at Billboard Live on Sunset Strip circa 1998. Total chaos. 50 people on stage and he was absolutely wasted. He urinated on the stage and security ejected him from his own concert. I was working there at the time and brought a girl I wanted to impress to the show. It was an absolute embarrassment. Story 7. 30 Seconds to Mars. The concert was at the Paramount in Denver. It was advertised as a regular concert, with New Politics as the opening act. New Politics performed very well. Then Jared Leto came on stage with an acoustic guitar and started to test new material without any other band members. We left. Story 8. Oasis very close to the front. No complaint about the band. We kept getting wet and assumed people were throwing drinks. We were wrong. We were getting covered in bottles of urine that people were throwing to the front of the crowd. Put me off ever going to another concert. I washed my hair twice that night and still didn't feel clean. Story 9. Went to see Metal Face Doom and Mos Def. Doors opened at 8 p.m. Sat through 7 opening acts that kept getting worse. It literally felt like they were pulling people off the street to fill time. Finally, around 1 a.m., a clearly upset Mos Def came out and performed his set. Metal Face Doom never showed. Story 10. My worst and best concert at the same time was Billy Idol. It was an open-air rock festival in Scandinavia, and it was raining heavily. We were knee-deep in mud, poured down continuously for hours. Billy Idol was with us for 4 hours. He stood at the very front edge of the main stage. He was soaking wet in solidarity with his fans. So impressive. I will never forget this amazing experience. Story 11, 30 Seconds to Mars. This was maybe a decade or so ago, and I am no longer a fan for many reasons. But Jared Leto and his cult vibes were present even then. I swear most of the show was him waving around a 30 Seconds to Mars flag and only teasing songs while trying to get the audience to sing the rest. When they did not, he would just change to another song. I cannot say it was absolutely horrible because I liked the music and some songs were performed normally. But I do remember telling my boyfriend at the time, I think Jared Leto thinks he is Jesus. That was very strange. It just came off as very arrogant and more like paying to stroke his ego rather than paying to be entertained. I think the rumors of him starting a cult and being predatory with underage fans came out a year or so later. I was not surprised, and no, I do not think the cult thing is a gimmick or publicity stunt. He is very strange, and I am just waiting for the day he gets cancelled. Story 12. Moby had nothing to do with him or his performance. He was great, but I saw him at a festival in a large stadium, and everyone just seemed very aggressive. In the middle of his set, the guy in front of me turned around and accused me of peeing on him. He shoved me, looking for a fight. I had no idea what he was talking about. I was eventually able to de-escalate the situation. The thing is, I was actually covering the festival for a publication, so I was at work. My friend, who was the photographer that night for the same publication, said that people were intentionally elbowing her very expensive camera just for amusement. Security was unhelpful. Basic organization was non-existent. We could not get out of there fast enough. My review of the festival was not kind. Story 13. David Cassidy was arrogant and mean. People were openly complaining about him after the show. Davy Jones opened for him and was absolutely a delight. Funny, candid, and self-deprecating. He gave us a great show. Cassidy acted like he couldn't wait to be done playing. He even disrespected the Partridge Family material, forgetting that is what made him famous to begin with. Story 14. Psychedelic Furs showed up over an hour late, phoned it in when they arrived, and left after 45 minutes. My date thought the band was taking a break when the house lights came on and people started leaving. Estimated time of arrival. This was Chicago, 1981. I saw them a few years later in Washington, D.C., and they put on a much better show that lasted about an hour. Story 15. Foo Fighters, Hershey, Pennsylvania, July 17, 2000. Probably the only one here where the band admits it and lists it as their worst concert ever. To set the stage, this is what I think happened. Most is factual, but some is conjecture. Foo Fighters were touring with Red Hot Chili Peppers, and this was the last segment of the tour. They were going on a short break afterward, and Foo Fighters were going to headline their own tour. Right away, they were in a let's just get this over mood. Music television was in its late music video stage but still very popular, and they decided to drive down from New York City, meet the bands, and go out the night before the concert to record some behind-the-scenes band footage at a local bar. Both Foo Fighters and Red Hot Chili Peppers got into a drinking contest and tried to one-up each other. On the day of the concert, Foo Fighters took the stage and gave the worst performance imaginable. It was unbelievably bad. Even a local Foo Fighters cover band would have sounded better. It seemed like they tried to add various styles to the songs, like Monkey Wrench as a reggae song, Learn to Fly as swing, all on the fly, and it was terrible. They cut the set short and ran off stage. The set was very short. After an extra long break, the Red Hot Chili Peppers came out and blew the roof off the place. To me, the concert was life-changing. I was a huge Foo Fighters fan going in. My girlfriend had gotten us tickets and a hotel room for my birthday to see the concert. I was very excited. I did not care much about Red Hot Chili Peppers, but I would have done anything to see the Foo Fighters. After the concert, I became a Red Hot Chili Peppers fan and stopped listening to Foo Fighters for years. I still struggle to listen to them. I posted about this concert on various "What is the worst concert you ever saw" posts over the years. One time, someone linked me to the music television night before coverage, and another time, a video years later showed Dave Grohl himself admitting in an interview this was the worst show they had ever done. Anyway, yeah, worst show Foo Fighters. Even the band admitted it was their worst. So bad, it literally changed my musical taste in one night. Story 16. The Strokes. The lead singer was so drunk during the show that it was cancelled after 2 or 3 songs. They made up for it with a free show, but the same thing happened. It was too bad because they were not a bad band. Story 17. Modest Mouse performed at 2 different festivals. Isaac Brock was so intoxicated he could barely stand. It was sad. At the 3rd festival he was mostly sober and it was a great show. Story 18. Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. The first time we saw them it was amazing. The next time we brought all our friends to the show, and it was awful. I ran into the lead singer in an Ask Me Anything one time and asked him why there was such a drop-off. He became angry and said he is not my entertainment monkey. I explained that we were the ones who bought his tickets, music, and movie Big Easy Express still recommended, and paid for babysitters so we could get out to hear them, and it was disappointing. In short, we are not his audience monkeys either. Do not take it for granted. Story 19. Spin Doctors. Saw them in Boston in 1993 or so. They were so high I don't think they knew where they were. They would randomly forget to play their instruments in the middle of a song. Story 20. Madonna. Around 2010, she was almost 2 hours late, and the songs were mediocre except for a few. However, the worst part was not Madonna herself. Because she was late, some fans probably drank more than they should have. About midway through the concert, I heard a splashing noise behind me and was instantly showered in a fine mist of vomit. Of course, my instant reaction was to be angry, but with so many other people yelling at this poor lady, I just felt bad for her. She was apologetic and trying to use her sweater to wipe up the worst of it, so I gave her a plastic bag I had on me and some gum. It was unpleasant to sit with some vomit on me for the rest of the night, but it felt good to help someone instead of lashing out. Story 21. In the early 1980s, Cheap Trick held a concert on a riverboat in New Orleans. I was a very excited 16-year-old and arrived a little early so I could get up close to the stage. The event was severely oversold, and there were too many people crammed into the ballroom. I ended up squished against the barricades near the stage and started to panic. At that moment, Rick Nielsen threw a handful of guitar picks with his cartoon face on them into the crowd. This caused a massive surge of people rushing the stage, and I was hit hard enough to knock the wind out of me, causing me to pass out over the barricade railing. Security had to come and pull me out while the music was still playing. They carried me off across the stage like a surfboard tucked under their arms. The worst part was that security accused me of using drugs or being drunk and tried to blame what happened on intoxication. I sobbed uncontrollably and explained that I was a junior in high school and not using drugs or alcohol. They finally let me go. For 20 years, I hated Rick Nielsen with great intensity and wished him ill, until one night when I was tending bar at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Jackson, Mississippi, while Cheap Trick was in town performing at closing time. I saw someone sneak into the bar through the lobby, and I silently complained because last-minute drinks can often be a hassle. When I turned around, I saw a very exhausted older man, and my jaw dropped. All the hatred I had held for him for 2 decades disappeared. I could relate to the mental state he was in at that moment. He had finished performing in front of screaming crowds and only wanted to sit at my bar in the dark and drink an ice-cold Heineken in peace, hiding from the people searching for autographs before going up to his room. I left him to finish his beer while I cleaned up and locked everything down. When he finished, he thanked me for being kind enough to keep the bar open for him because he knew I wanted to close. He paid for the beer and left a $20 tip. I believe that was the universe setting things right. Story 22. I saw Fergie in concert when she was performing solo. She didn't have much of a repertoire, so there were a couple of long interludes where the backup dancers had a dance-off that was clearly choreographed with predetermined winners. The show had no flow and felt like high schoolers putting on a talent show. By herself, she is not that great of an entertainer. The concert was at a casino without a proper theater, so it took place in a large ballroom with all the seats on the same level, making good views nearly impossible. There were also two intoxicated girls who kept trying to get overly friendly with my husband and me. We are a gay couple, to the point of being very annoying. We had to find a way to avoid them, so we moved seats several times until we lost them. Luckily, the seats were unassigned, so we were free to move anywhere. We eventually ended up standing off to the side by one of the bars. It felt like a very long night, and we left saying, "What was that?" to each other. We have also seen Maroon 5 several times because my husband loves Adam Levine, and their shows were better than Fergie's but not great. Kelly Clarkson opened for them at one show and was much better than Maroon 5. At that same show, Adam Levine got mad at the audience for not being loud enough and said, "Come on, people." I said, "Get loud," like a spoiled child. You could tell he is not very likable in real life. Story 23, Jerry Cantrell. It had nothing to do with Jerry. I saw him with Bush and Candlebox a year earlier, and I thought his solo performances were even better than his Alice in Chains shows. His co-lead vocalist Greg Puciato harmonized perfectly with him. I bought tickets to a show at the Starland Ballroom. Filter opened and performed exceptionally well. They sounded amazing. When Jerry came on, whatever the sound engineer did, you couldn't hear any vocals. They replaced the microphone, but he was still barely audible. The crowd started getting upset, but it wasn't the performance. We left 2/3 of the way through the show. I would definitely see him again, just at a different venue. He sounded amazing at the PNC Bank Arts Center less than a year earlier. Story 24. Love Radiohead, great performance, but the crowd was awful. 3 separate people near the front got upset because others were in their personal space. If you need a lot of personal space, please don't stand at the front of a concert. Later in the show, there was a crowd crush from people trying to get close to the stage. I hope my introverts survived. Tom York getting mad at the crowd for singing along to Nude really took the cake. He actually stopped the song to say, "It's my song. I'll be the one to sing it." I wasn't even mad. It was hilarious. Story 25. Eric Clapton went to see him in Glasgow. About an hour into his set, he was playing Cocaine and got some feedback from a monitor. He ended up throwing his guitar down and storming off the stage. The rest of the band looked around in disbelief but followed him off stage. He came back after about 10 minutes, played one more song, and then the concert finished. The house lights came on, and the stage crew started taking the stage apart. As you might imagine, the crowd was not happy. Story 26. The Lemonheads just last year, actually just Evan Dando and some other people at this point, I believe were set to play It's a Shame About Ray and Come On Feel the Lemonheads in their entirety. He was completely out of it, played the songs at double speed unenthusiastically, and his voice was wrecked. There was no banter. It seemed like a chore for him. He forgot the lyrics multiple times but occasionally held the microphone up to the audience to sing for him. I left early and wouldn't be surprised if I heard about his death any day now. It was a bummer. I felt bad for the band. It's a good thing I saw him in Wisconsin because the crowd was unfazed by such a hot mess. Story 27. Bob Dylan. Now, don't get me wrong, I adore him and his music is legendary. When you see him live, you cannot make out a word he is saying, and that kind of sucks. You definitely know the song, but his singing is nothing but mumbling. Also, I have seen Ozzy Osbourne several times, and he should have retired a while ago. Once again, huge Ozzy fan, but the show lacks a lot. Story 28. Bob Dylan during his Christian tour only performed his Christian songs to the point where I thought he was going to pass around a collection plate. One of the backup singers stood too close to the microphone, and every time she sang, it sounded shrill. I went with hardcore Bob Dylan fans, and we ended up walking out. Story 29. Kanye West showed up 4 hours late and gave the most low-energy performance I have ever seen. It almost put me off hip-hop shows completely. Fortunately, I caught Jay-Z a few months later, and he absolutely rocked the stage with a full brass band. Story 30. Avril Lavigne, very early in her career, stood still throughout the entire show with her arms crossed and mumbled continuously. Story 31. I have been to hundreds of shows, and nobody was as horrible as Robert Allen Zimmerman. I could not understand a word of what he was saying. He was barely even playing his guitar. Every song was a reworked version of one of his old hits, and they all sounded awful. I have never seen so many people walk out of a show before. Story 32. Saw Elvis Costello a couple of years ago. When he played the hits, he either changed the arrangements or sang the song a full beat behind the music. You could tell he did not care. All the newer material was perfectly on time and well played. He showed no interest in playing the old songs that people came for. I left halfway through after he performed a Merle Haggard and Welcome to the Working Week mashup. Other people were leaving as well. Nick Lowe and Low Straitjackets opened the show and were outstanding. Nick was a true professional. He put on a great set, sounded fantastic, the band was tight, and he had some funny and quick banter between songs. Story 33. Supertramp. It was not the band's fault. I got too intoxicated and blacked out. I can only remember entering the stadium. Story 34. Deep Purple. Edgar Winter and Alice Cooper performed before them, but they did not hold up. Something was off all night. Ian sounded like Bob Dylan arguing with Porky Pig. They had technical issues with the video screen after the second song. Steve's solo in Smoke on the Water was soulless. I was disappointed. Story 35. Beth Orton in Leamington Spa, England. Not her fault. The venue is terrible. The concert seating is directly in front of the bar, which was full of people who hadn't paid for the concert but were just there to drink, hanging by the bar and talking loudly throughout her performance. She kept telling us we were rude in between every song. Why am I even playing in this place? Thanks, we bought tickets to see you. It wasn't us. We were trying to listen. Then her support act came on with her and made loud shrieking, bird noises into the microphone throughout his songs. Really disappointing, as she has an amazing voice. Story 36. Ozzfest 2005. I went because they had an incredible lineup. However, this is the show that will be forever remembered negatively because it was the infamous San Bernardino event where Sharon Osbourne disrupted Iron Maiden's performance. About half the crowd left early because of it. When Ozzy Osbourne came on stage, the remaining crowd looked like they were about to start rioting. I can't believe that was 20 years ago. Story 37. Woodstock 1999. I live 4 hours from there. Took us 12 hours to get there due to the traffic jam. 6 of us were packed into an old 1983 Lincoln with no air conditioning. Portable toilets had pyramids of waste coming up over the level of the seat when we arrived that first morning. I took $150 with me to buy drugs, food, and souvenirs and bought maybe 2 orders of $10 chicken tenders. The rest was spent on $5 bottled water. I forgot sunblock, so I got the worst sunburn I have ever had in my life, heat stroke. I had my period, and due to the unsanitary conditions, I came down with strep throat midway through. Then we sent a couple of people from our group to find the car when it was time to leave. We waited at the park exit for 6 hours for them to work their way up through traffic rather than lug all our gear, especially with how sick I was. We tore down part of a wall and built a lean-to in the lot to escape the sun. I do not remember much of the drive back. With my last $20, I bought a bootleg Woodstock shirt from a guy selling them in the lot. While there, I packed up a bag of grass, actual grass, to give to friends. Could not give much else. Had to focus on survival. Story 38. Amy Winehouse came on stage about 90 minutes late. Some of the audience booed. She went on a slurred rant about how the audience did not appreciate her enough. She performed a poor rendition of a song, nowhere close to singing well. She received much more booing and then stormed off the stage. Story 39. I went to a Jimmy Buffett concert, and 4 young women behind us talked the entire time. Ushers were called but only asked them to be quiet, which the women ignored. The people around them also asked them to be quiet and were told to leave. When the music got louder, they got louder. As petty revenge, the purse of the woman behind me was kicked under my seat. I poured about 10 ounces of beer into it and kicked it under the seat in front of me. Story 40. INXS. Not because of the music, but because at the time it was full of little screaming teenage girls. I think that high-pitched screaming gave me permanent hearing damage. Story 41. Led Zeppelin. I saw them in a smaller Midwestern city in the early 1970s, where no one important was watching. They performed without an opening act or lighting effects, just a bare stage. Several roadies roamed the stage during the show. There was a tangle of visible wires, which limited the band's movement. The members spent a lot of time talking to each other. It was like watching a garage band rehearse. Story 42, A Shin's concert. The band was amazing, but the crowd was obnoxious. The worst was a woman sitting right behind us, doing an ear-piercing, two fingers in her mouth whistle the entire show. We tried to tell her to be quiet, but she took it as encouragement and whistled harder. Story 43, Red Hot Chili Peppers around 2016 on the Getaway Tour. Our seats were not the best to start with on the side, and with everyone standing, it was a bit annoying to see the show. They did 2 nights at the arena and split the hit songs between the 2 dates, meaning 2 of my favorites were not played. Scar Tissue and Can't Stop. More than that, the vibes were flat for the gig. I went in super excited, having never seen them before. They played about 1 hour and 20 minutes despite their extensive back catalog. Every couple of songs, they started jamming while Anthony Kiedis repeatedly went off stage. I think he was ill, as they pulled out of a Dublin show soon after. This killed the immersion and flow of the set, in my opinion. Many songs were played too slowly, for example Californication. It was an example of a concert not living up to the big expectations I had going in. A mix of time passing, me getting into Faith No More instead, and discovering how much of a dirtbag Kiedis is, means that the Red Hot Chili Peppers gig gets worse the more I think about it, in a joking way. Story 44. Around 1978, Led Zeppelin performed in Chicago. We had second-row seats. Jimmy Page was intoxicated and had a large green bottle of alcohol next to the drum kit, which he visited between and during songs. They played 5 great songs, the 5th being Since I've Been Loving You. In mid-song, Page fell backward onto the drum podium. The song stopped, and the stage was vacated. Within 5 minutes, the crowd was throwing beer cans and anything else at the empty stage. Finally, Robert Plant came out on stage, told the audience that unfortunately Jimmy had a stomach virus, and then left the stage to loud boos and more projectiles. Story 45. Went to see Counting Crows with my mother-in-law at her request. She was very excited. The band took the stage, and the lead singer was clearly intoxicated and used a string of profanity. My mother-in-law's face immediately told me that a horrible mistake had been made. She told me that she thought we were seeing the contemporary Christian band Casting Crowns. We stayed for a few songs anyway, and then it started raining hard. We left. Story 46. Smash Mouth performed at a local food festival. The singer was so intoxicated that he could not remember the words to any of the songs. It was easily the worst musically, and on a personal level it was very tragic. Rest in peace, hope you have found some peace. Story 47. Rush at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. The Prudential Center was uncomfortably hot, and we were falling asleep in our seats. The sound was so distorted that we could not tell what song was being played. We had to leave. No complaints about Rush because I never actually heard if they were good or not. I will never buy a ticket at the Prudential Center again. Story 48. The Eagles in 1979. This was during their long-run tour, and it should have showcased a band near its peak. Instead, they acted very irritable, especially Glenn Frey, and played a very boring show. It was almost a note-by-note retread of the record, and they even sat in chairs for some of it. The energy was very low, and it felt like they were going through the motions. Honestly, musically, I have seen worse shows, mostly by bands I did not like and got dragged to see. But the Eagles were definitely the most disappointing. Story 49. We ate gelatin tablets at Farm Aid at Tinley Park in 1998 because the bandfish was there. We peaked too early in the day. John Cougar Mellencamp is not advisable to listen to while under the influence of LSD, and listening to Neil Young pleading for the farmers was emotionally intense. Fish performed exceptionally well at the end of the night and brought the universe back into alignment. Story 50. Kid Rock, summer of 2015. Trashiest crowd I have ever seen. The place literally stank because of all the cheap beer. I guess watered-down beer is free at his shows. Also, the music was bad, but that is expected. Story 51, Cake. Most outrageously terrible concert I have ever seen. The lead singer was very rude. It was a standing room only venue. They came on an hour late with no opening act. The lead singer kept stopping in the middle of songs for random reasons. At one point, he smelled something unusual and just left to check it out. Most of the show involved yelling at audience members or yelling about various things. They played maybe 3 songs all night. Story 52. Florida Georgia Line. My wife dragged me. I enjoy some country music, such as George Strait and Garth Brooks, but despise newer corporate commercial music. The concert was terrible. They spent more time doing covers of Backstreet Boys songs than playing their own. Story 53. I can't remember the name of the band, but my wife and I went to one concert. For some reason, a woman took issue with my wife and kept bumping into her. We tried moving away, but she followed us. I asked her to stop, and we got the stop what? Or gaslighting treatment. It was really weird and annoying. The fact that I can remember this and not the band is probably telling. Story 54. I love the band, but Shane MacGowan was known for drinking too much. On this night, he was too drunk to sing at the pace the band was playing. He swayed from one side of the stage to the other, mumbling lyrics that were not in sync with the band. It was a relief when he finally staggered off stage, and the band was able to play without him. I don't really understand the appeal of bands that drink so much they can't perform properly, like the Replacements in the past. Story 55. Saw Lifehouse in 2002 or 2003, and they were not into it at all. No energy. Tried to say, hello, where are we? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Story 56. Let me just put it out there that I did not have any familiarity with Bon Iver or his music before the show. I only went because my partner is a fan, and I am open to new artists. It was the most tedious, low-energy show I have ever attended. If it had not been a standing-only venue, I would have been sleeping by the second song. Bored and out of my mind, I went to my happy place in my head and stayed there until the end. Story 57. Michelle Branch in 2017. I bought a ticket for the soundcheck and VIP meet and greet before the show. All of us who bought tickets were lined up outside the venue, but nobody came to let us in when the time came. Someone called the venue to see what was going on, and by the time they got in touch with someone, it was probably an hour past the scheduled time before they let us in. It was also in the middle of the summer, so we were standing outside in the heat. We only got about 5 minutes at the soundcheck before we lined up for photos and autographs. As for the show, it ended up being the worst that I have ever seen. She performed all of her songs with a hard rock flair, and it sounded like what you would hear at a bad high school talent show. If she had just played them as the pop songs they are, it probably would have been an okay show. Story 58. Radiohead in Bristow, Virginia. I had seen the same tour in Rainbows in Atlanta a few days earlier and flew to Washington, D.C. to catch the show as well. When I arrived in Washington, D.C. a couple of days before the show, it was raining heavily. I went to the Georgetown Patagonia store to buy a raincoat because I did not own one. It kept raining heavily and continued to do so leading up to and during the show. Somehow, unlike thousands of other unfortunate fans, we made it into the sold-out show. This included a fairly long walk from the parking lot through 3 to 4 inches of standing water. Shoes, socks, pants, and anything not covered by my new raincoat were drenched. Fortunately, we had covered seats, though it was about 50 degrees Fahrenheit and raining hard enough and somewhat sideways that we were still getting misted the entire time. The band put on a strong effort, acknowledging the poor conditions and that many people had not been able to get into the venue. There were some people on the uncovered lawn area, which looked especially miserable. Turns out that because of all the rain, some major roads in the area were completely flooded. Closed roads combined with a massive influx of cars trying to get to the show created a traffic disaster. Eventually, we got back to the car while it was still pouring rain and then waited about 2 hours just to move to get out of the parking lot because traffic in the area was completely blocked and many obvious routes were impassable. There were many police officers directing traffic away from flooded areas, so it took a long time to get back to Washington, D.C. I had to fly out the next morning wearing wet shoes. Good times. A blog post about the event that I can no longer find ended with the sentence, "I am surprised no one died." Story 59, Christmas concert. Professional level. Stomach flu was going around. A chain reaction of vomiting swept across the orchestra floor. People were literally running and screaming. The concert never paused, but 2/3 of the orchestra floor was evacuated, turning it into a disaster area, like a hazardous materials site. People could not return to their seats. I had never even heard of sympathetic vomiting until this day. Story 60, Brian Wilson. Saw him a couple of years ago, right before his dementia diagnosis was made public. It was very clear from his show that he should not be performing but should be sitting on a beach, relaxing somewhere instead. I felt like I was watching a drunk old man trying to karaoke some Beach Boys songs when he did not know the words. I just felt bad for him the whole time. Story 61. In the late 1970s at Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, I saw Boston with Sammy Hagar opening. Hagar was awesome and made me a lifelong fan, but my friends and I were really there for Boston. We were so excited, but then so let down. Boston's sound system was terrible. It was nothing but a jumble of noise. You couldn't really hear the instruments, and the vocals were non-existent. At one point, Brad Delp was simply yelling at someone on the crew. The only thing that came through audibly was the organ intro on Foreplay/Long Time. We were college kids, so we didn't demand a refund, but it was the only concert I have ever attended that would have justified it. Story 62. Unfortunately, Whitney Houston was 2.5 hours late. People started leaving, and even more people left when she finally arrived on stage. I believe she was upset when she saw the arena slowly emptying. She went on a rant about how rude the people were for leaving. She was very sweaty, and her voice was cracked. She could barely sing. She was only on stage for 30 minutes. People were booing her, and she said, "Forget this," and left. Story 63. Sean Kingston had 8 opening acts, including some dancers, a comedian, and a couple of singers to round it out. He came on stage for 23 minutes, sang 2 songs, and left. I demanded that my friend pay me back the $40 ticket for the show. I was so mad I was going to throw my shoe at him, and I love those shoes, so you know it was bad. Story 64. Counting Crows. He decided not to sing the songs. Instead, he performed spoken word and slam poetry with the lyrics. We left 3/4 of the way through the show. It was brutal. Story 65. I was actually going to see Bad Company, but Ted Nugent was also on the bill. He plays so loudly that you literally cannot hear the words to the songs. It is common to have your ears ring after a concert, but mine rang for about 2 days. It was ridiculous. It was not even music at that point. It was basically just noise. Story 66. Dave Matthews Band was opened by Macy Gray. Macy was fine, but the set was short. However, it was very obvious that Dave Matthews Band was in an argument. They would stop and start songs, were yelling at each other, and kicking equipment. It was messy and created bad vibes. People started leaving the show, and so did I. They ended the set early. Story 67. Ani DeFranco, Charlotte, 2010 or so. People would not stop talking. She paused the show and complained. Story 68. A Fish concert in rural Indiana. The band was great, but it was literally the bad smell that ruined it for me. It turns out rural Fish fans are not known for their hygiene. Story 69. I saw Stone Temple Pilots open for Robert Plant years ago. The lead singer of Stone Temple Pilots used a bullhorn to sing into the microphone for most of their set. I could not understand any of the lyrics. It was absolutely pointless. Story 70. Maybe not the worst, but the most bizarre was the final Clash tour date I saw in Long Beach. The band wore black leather from head to toe, except Joe Strummer, who looked like Bing Crosby. He had a flat-top haircut dyed red, a red sports jacket, and snow-white slacks. Joe Strummer and his backing band. Story 71. Incubus in Boston back in 2019. They were not necessarily terrible, just really boring. Especially considering it was a smaller venue, I expected it to be much more high energy, but it came off more like a dress rehearsal than the actual show. Story 72. Surprisingly, it was Bob Dylan. The people next to us were completely drunk, sang along loudly with every song, and one kept yelling, "My sister plays that on the guitar," throughout the whole concert. Story 73. REM in Madison Square Garden. I just returned from China and was exhausted. My girlfriend got us tickets. I fell asleep within 5 to 10 minutes of it starting. Story 74. Aerosmith at Champagne Jam in 1979. Other bands sounded great. These guys performed poorly. I think they were all drugged up and incoherent by the time they went on. Stayed for 3 to 4 songs and left after. Mother's Finest and the Dixie Dregs were incredible. Joyce Kennedy put her heart and soul into it and rocked the house. Their blend of hard rock and funk was impressive. Whiteface also worked that style and played that day too. Unfortunately, that genre did not become nationally popular. The bass player from Whiteface later joined the producers, who had a couple of catchy top 40 hits a few years later. The music scene in Atlanta was amazing at that time. The Atlanta Rhythm section was the headliner at Champagne Jam and a local favorite that did well nationally with multiple hit records. Story 75. Lauryn Hill performed in the Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Durham area in the summer of 1999. She and Busta Rhymes were touring together. Busta was the opening act and was over an hour late to start his set. Lauryn was also a few hours late for her performance. The show was at an outdoor venue with no shade available. I remember Busta being okay during his performance, but Lauryn was a rambling mess for much of the show. Her voice had moments of greatness, but I was very disappointed by her lack of professionalism and her inability to stay focused during her performance. For comparison, I have seen Mary J. Blige perform while heavily intoxicated, and she still managed to be on time and deliver an excellent show. Story 76. Counting Crows. The way they played their hits made me think no one dislikes their music more than they do. Story 77. Bright Eyes. I had a girlfriend bring me to a show of theirs in 2003 or so. It was good. I went to a show a few months ago, and it was the weakest, most boring, pandering nonsense I have ever experienced. I wanted to stay after the show to confront Connor Oberst. Total decline. Story 78. Beyoncé, Manchester. I was not a huge fan anyway. The tickets were a very strange gift. She came on 2.5 hours late, and to entertain the excited teenagers in the crowd, someone on her team held a competition that had the kids running through the tiered seating, trampling anyone still seated. It was an absolute disaster. Story 79. Morrissey performed at an amphitheater in Santa Fe. He was only there for about 20 minutes. He lay on the stage singing "Meat is Murder" and then left. I saw him in Boulder about a year earlier, and it was one of the best shows I have ever seen. I am very disappointed. Story 80. Alan Jackson. I'm not really a country music fan, but I went with a girl who was. It was like someone put a compact disc in and just chose the introduction. No full songs were played, just parts of many songs. Story 81. Sublime in May of 1995. Short answer, drugs. Long answer, I do not think they actually completed a song. They would play a bit of it, then it would fall apart. There were random people on stage and Brad's dog. Story 82. Chuck Berry was so intoxicated that he could not play or sing. Many people walked out during his show. Story 83. Saw Cake at Firefly one year. I was not a superfan but generally liked them and was excited to see them. The set was awful. Totally flat. You could tell the band did not want to be there. We ended up walking over to another stage mid-set. I have heard they are hit or miss, but after that performance I would never pay to see them again. Story 84. Guns N' Roses in 2006. After every other song, Axl left the stage, ostensibly to change his jacket. The rest of the band was left on stage for up to 10 minutes each time, performing one jam or solo after another. Then Axl would return in a new jacket as if nothing had happened. They would perform 2 songs and the same pattern repeated. This occurred after a delay of at least 1 hour. It is reported that they were banned from ever appearing at that festival again. I left before the encores. Story 85. Diana Ross forgot the words, then brought her children on stage and they played around. She simply walked off without ending the concert. We all sat there wondering if it was over. It was really strange. This happened in Los Angeles years ago. Story 86. Management in 2011 in Austin. The most soulless performance I have ever seen. It was like they had been on a week-long drug binge and were having the worst come-down of their lives. They did not say one word to the crowd until the very end, and then just said thank you in the most monotone voice. Story 87. Madonna. Her concert was scheduled to start at 7:30 p.m., but she took the stage at 10 p.m. The opening act was a DJ whose name I could not identify. He performed for 2 hours, which many people disliked, leading the entire stadium to move to the beer garden to drink heavily. When Madonna finally appeared on stage, the audience was very intoxicated. Some individuals in front of me were extremely drunk. One of them vomited on the floor, causing the area to smell unpleasant. I paid approximately $250 for that concert. I will not attend again. Story 88. Marilyn Manson at the 2009 Download Festival was by far the worst show I have ever seen. He appeared to be under the influence of something and kept leaving the stage for air, could barely sing his songs, kept losing his place, and only lasted about 2/3 of the advertised set time. What was truly disappointing was that Chris Cornell was performing on the other stage at the time, and I never got the chance to correct my grievous error. Special mention to Avenged Sevenfold supporting Iron Maiden at Twickenham in 2008. I am not their biggest fan, but the sound was very poor, and they ended the set early because of a crowd emergency. Final mention to Idlewild playing a basement venue in Glasgow, probably around 2007 or 2008. It was not the band's fault at all, but it was a B-side set, and I did not know their songs well enough to get into them. Additionally, the toilets were completely flooded. Not a great night. Story 89. Bastille 2019. They came on stage, said, "Hello Amsterdam," sang their album, said, "Thank you Amsterdam," and left. No stage presence, no crowd interaction, no unique experiences or variations of their song. It was basically worse than listening to them on Spotify. Story 90. Arctic Monkeys performed quite a few years ago. The band was brilliant, but the crowd was the type that even Jerry Springer would avoid. It was at Trafford Cricket Ground with adults pushing to the front with their toddlers and starting fights near people having mosh pits close to their little ones. Women were squatting in the middle of the field to urinate and defecate, then getting up and wandering off to finish their drinks. The whole arena smelled like a toilet, and nothing can remove that smell from my memory. The people urinating on the field even caused the cricket game the following week to be cancelled. It was the trashiest crowd I have ever encountered. Story 91. I went to see Tiger Army at a small venue in Las Vegas, and they had to announce to the crowd that Tiger Army was not playing because of an issue they found disappointing. If I remember correctly, it was because they did not know they would be playing outdoors, and they did not want to perform outdoors. I lost a lot of respect for the band after that. I believe this was around the time their second album was released. Story 92. Rascal Flatts went to WeFest, a country music festival, which was overall great, but Rascal Flatts' performance was disappointing. They kept playing 30 seconds of a song, then stopping to talk, and then starting a different song. It was horrible, annoying, and boring. Story 93. I was pretty disappointed last time I saw The Church. The band looked completely disinterested, even while creating tedious washes of shoegaze guitar effects they inserted into their material. Worse, lead singer and songwriter Steve Kilbey was clearly not enjoying playing his same old past hits and rather sarcastically reminded us of that at various times. It is a reason I will not be going to see their current 40 Years of Singles tour. If they were not happy playing their hits last time, I cannot imagine how resentful they will be playing only singles this time. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.